Welcome. Welcome to those of you joining this convening and welcome to Creating Cultures of Honor. I'm Dr. Vonnetta L. West. I'm so excited to be sharing as a part of this gathering an opportunity for me to share with and facilitate a discussion with, even if it's via chat, great educators and leaders who, for whatever reason, find yourselves a part of this gathering today. We're talking about for the next 50 minutes creating cultures of honor. It's a topic that I talk about in spaces now, virtually, at least for now, across the country, based on the premise that when we know the type of cultures that we want to create, we can put in the work to make that happen. So I want you to think during these minutes that we have together that if you just consider whether you're in a school or you're in an administrative building, whatever your role is, what type of culture do you want there? And is that culture a reflection of honor, of respect, of dignity, of love, of value, and any of the other things that we would use to describe the type of community that fosters leadership, kindness, compassion, and progress? Progress in terms of meeting goals. So we'll talk even in this session about how um, honor helps us to achieve and helps us to produce. It's very important to any atmosphere, even if I'm an individual atmosphere. One of the things that I tell people often is I am an atmosphere. I believe that about us as people, that wherever we show up as an atmosphere. So as we get started, I just want to share a few things about myself and what brings me here. I started last year, a little over a year now, Go West Consulting LLC. That's after a number of years, 21 in fact, in the nonprofit sector and the service sector. That included living in Liberia, West Africa for 2 years and helping to start a computer school there. And that included being the director of education and training for the King Center. It's the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change here in Atlanta. And that now includes being a leader with the National Center for Civil and Human Rights Interfaith Response to White Supremacy. So I develop sessions and I develop content based on things that have been at the core of what I want to talk about, and most importantly, who I want to be. But then, in addition to that, the type of engagement that I want to be involved in across the globe. So we talk about eradicating racism, the bias challenge, leadership that grows your justice footprint, salvation versus community, a session that I did during this convening earlier today. So as we get started, just sharing that one of the things that I try to do myself, and that's why I feel comfortable leading these conversations, is create cultures of honor in my family, in my partnerships with organizations, and in every area of my life. I think it's important that whatever we're talking about, we're trying to see that happen in our own lives. That helps us avoid hypocrisy. So as I share in our time together, please know these are things that I am intent on and continue to apply in my own life. So it's just a bit about me. And here's a little bit about our agenda in our time together. We're going to define honor and discuss areas of honor. We'll define culture and discuss aspects of culture. Then we'll talk for a bit about confronting dishonor. You think about the spaces that you normally work in or serve in, and think about dishonor that you may see there, especially once we define it and we talk about what honor is and what dishonor looks like. Now, I want to leave you with, because this is very important, some action steps, things that you can do with what we've learned today. And hopefully we'll have time for some Q&A. But as we get started, before we go to the definition I have here, I wanted you to share in the chat your definitions for honor. What do you believe honor is? If you hear somebody say, they treated me with honor, what does that mean? If you think that concerning any relationship in your life, what does that mean to you? If someone engages you with honor, I'll pause. I think it takes a few moments at least to type in here for the chat. I want to thank Dr. Johnson and the team at IDRA. And maybe I'm just saying IDRA because I want to think about Idris Elba. I don't know. Maybe it's IDRA. But when I see the title, I think Idris Elba. I should be there. Hey again. Welcome again, Dave. Respect, believing in. That is honor. What else? Thank you for that. When we think honor, what do we think about? When you hear honor, we need to know what it is. We're going to talk more about it. I have a definition here, but what do you think? How do you feel when someone treats you with honor? What you think honor is? Honest and respectful. When people are respectful, that's honor. Let's look at the definition here. Definitions next, actually. This is an overview which provides some insight into honor here of the session. We can cultivate spaces and paradigms of engagement in which honor is pervasive and not dependent on hierarchy. Very important. As we talk about honor, we're not talking about hierarchy. I've been in a lot of spaces where honor was only dependent on title and position. That's not honor. That's elitism. Those things are different. I want you to consider for a moment the difference between, as we continue to share and exchange today, the difference between honor and elitism. Tracy says it's listening. It is. That's a huge part of honor. This session focuses on how to make those spaces and paradigms realities and on the tangible, measurable, and relational outcomes of doing so. What does honor look like? How does it show up? I just want to share as we move towards the definition too, this quote from Dr. King. My study of Dr. King, his philosophy really enhances me, I believe, as a facilitator, as a learner, and just as a human being. But this is one of his quotes about the beloved community. Our goal is to create a beloved community, and this will require a qualitative change in our souls as well as a quantitative change in our lives. So we're looking at, when we talk about beloved community, which is not a utopia. If you've ever heard this phrase before, particularly as it connects to Dr. King, I want to be sure you know it's not a utopia. It's not a place that's perfect. It's just a place where when we have conflict, we resolve it differently. And our goal is to engage people with dignity and respect and love, compassion, grace, and toward the end of reconciliation. So that takes some qualitative change and some quantitative change, some things we can measure, and then some things that happen internally. So consider that as we move forward in talking about honor, especially as it relates to culture. I'm asking this question after that quote: how is culture, including in education, in schools, and in classrooms, indicative of quality and quantity as related to the beloved community? Simply put, how we honor children, parents, each other, faculty and staff, anybody who has anything to do with education, how does the honor level in those spaces reflect the quality of what's happening internally and the things outside of us that we need to measure? Our goals for engagement, our goals for attendance, our goals for any area of education. How is our culture reflected? I think there's a quote that says, culture eats strategy every day. It does. I've ran into some organizations and been a part of some meetings where people had great strategy, but the culture was such that it destroyed that strategy. Things could never seem to happen, because in order for things to happen and be successful, there has to be a culture that accommodates that. So real quick, you don't have to answer in the chat room, but you can if you would like to. How much thought does your organization or your entity, your school, if you're part of a school, give to culture, atmosphere? We'll talk more about what culture is too. But you're welcome to answer that in the chat room or to just think about it. You can answer it there or you can think about it. I'm going to have this definition of honor up for a few moments, and I just want you to look at it. Think about it for a few minutes. It's just defining honor. A posture of care, respect, welcome, and belonging. A posture of care, respect, welcome, and belonging. Why do we have to talk about this? Somebody may be asking. Because it's showing up now more than ever in our society, from our schools to our systems to our family engagement, that somehow it's come to be that we're not cultivating honor. A posture of care, respect, welcome, and belonging. In other words, when I enter a space, does the culture welcome me? I'm not talking about if I have things that I'm saying is hateful or thing. I'm talking the welcome me. Does it promote dignity? Does it promote respect, compassion, care? Do people feel like it's a place that eventually, community and community, you have some agreed upon rules of engagement? That's sometimes things we don't talk about with community. People say we need to build community, but sometimes there are people who don't want to be a part of that community. They won't agree to the things that community has agreed to, right? And then that community has to determine what happens next. That's just true about life. You just don't engage people in community who keep harming and hurting community. Now, what we can't do, and this is a part of honor, we can't dehumanize people. That's a real issue right now, particularly as we look at the different things that are happening across the world. There are now groups. So I think we have to be very careful, particularly when we're in the, for lack of a better phrase, business of educating and caring for and edifying other people, that we don't let dishonor slip into, or that we don't welcome dishonor with open arms, but that we have a posture of care, respect, welcome, and belonging. I'll give you an example. I saw a tweet yesterday from someone who is from a few of my people groups, and it said, I've started to treat this group of people, I won't name the group, like the plague. And I responded and I said, that's dangerous. It's dangerous to dishonor people. It's very dangerous to dehumanize people. More dangerous, I believe, to dehumanize, because when we dehumanize, we've seen historically, dehumanization often leads to physical violence and to war. It's how you convince people that it's okay to put other human beings in concentration camps and to enslave other people. And we think it's safe and it's funny on social media, but it's a slippery slope when we start classifying people as inhuman. That's what that does. Describing people as plagues, alluding to them being plagues or pests or, anything like that we try to get rid of. It creates a way of thinking. And it's a result of a culture of dishonor, which means dishonor. It doesn't mean I disrespect or I disagree with things that you say or things that you do. Dishonor and dehumanization, it means I have a total disregard for you as a person. That's different than we have a competing or opposing ideologies. So this gets us out of this place where we start to believe if somebody's racist or if they're doing harmful things, we can live in a perpetual place of dehumanization and dishonor. You know what honor does? It keeps me clean. It means that no matter what other people do, this is my posture. And it's something that people in authority in particular must have. I saw a video yesterday of a police officer here in Metro Atlanta, where I live, kicking a woman in the park. I don't believe that's something that's reflective of the heart or the nature of all police. I don't believe that. And I don't believe anybody else can legitimately believe that either. Why? Because we don't know all police, right? That gets us out of prejudice. Anytime people say all people do something, I'm like, you don't even know all those people. When it's about just, professions or groups. Now, if you say to me, all neo-Nazis hate people, then I hate Black people, I'll probably say, yeah, that's true. Otherwise, they wouldn't be neo-Nazis. But when you start to think about professions and you think about dishonor, then we have some other things to consider. So now I'm looking at this video and I'm thinking, where does this behavior come from? How did this man learn? And maybe it's historical, foundational, some other things, a posture of dishonor. I've met educators who I think, based on talking to them in the beginning, some of them genuinely cared about what was happening with children, and a lot of them still very much care. I know great teachers. Let me just stop and say that. I've had great teachers. I know great teachers. But some teachers that I've met are in a posture now of dishonor. We'll go to what that means in a few minutes, where they don't present anymore an atmosphere or a posture of care, respect, welcome, and belonging. That's what this photo, when I saw it, that's what it symbolizes to me. People kind of yielding to each other in honor. First I said, these look like praying hands. But then I realized, in essence too, that is, I yield and welcome. That's care, respect, belonging. So if we're engaging children, what would it mean to have a culture of honor in a classroom? What would it mean to have a culture of honor in a class? Just think about that. If in forming our relationships with students, we said we want to be sure we have a culture of honor. If in forming our relationships with other faculty members, staff members, other administrators, we said we want a culture of honor. If in forming our relationships with parents, wow, we want a culture of honor. We want to create that. We want it to be mutual. Here's some areas of honor, this posture that we're talking about, relationally, virtually. I'm seeing on social media, I said, we got to get some honor and respect on here. We have a lot of what I call keyboard courage. People that, because they're not even using their real profile photos, are just, as my niece used to say, she's 26 now, but this used to be a word when she was a teenager, wilding out on social media in dishonoring each other. Economics, cultural, that's what we're focusing on today. Legislative, it's a lot of dishonor in policies, and there's a lot of dishonor in systems, and we want to see, I do, more honor in those spaces. So I want to pause for a moment. The same thing I asked with honor. What do you believe culture is? When you think about culture, what does that word mean to you? When you think about culture, what do you think about? Because we want to connect the two. We want to get that we need honor, but it has to be a part of our culture. If you want to make something cultural, you have to first start with looking at where the mores and the values and the ideas come from. If you think about a classroom or a school, what are the values and norms exactly, Archie? The values and norms of that place. The way things are with a group. So families have culture, right? My family does. We're distinct. We have norms. We have values. Simple things. A few Thanksgivings ago, one of my cousins made the macaroni and cheese. A norm in our house, because my grandmother was such a great cook, she passed in 2017, is like good food and family gatherings. So I had a cousin that made the mac and cheese. And I've been trying to tell my family, I don't know how we started assigning cousins to the staples, the staple foods for Thanksgiving. So we laughed and we said, yeah, that's not a part of our norm. I said, mm-mm. No, one of our family norms is if you can't cook, you don't. Because food and gatherings are a key part of how we engage each other. So now, we decided that the cousins would stick to like salads and things like that. And the aunts and uncles of the older generation would still provide the staples. Why? Because they were closer to my grandmother. They're her children. And so they sat with her and learned how to make these staples. So they've been doing it. My mom's the oldest. She's 73. It's a long time to have been looking at someone else. She was 69 when my grandmother passed. Yeah, if you can't cook, then don't. That's a norm in my family, Dave. I'm telling you, it's very serious. So we get to bring tea and drinks and paper products, desserts, but not the staple desserts like sweet potato pie. We stick with the norms. That's culture. What your family does regularly, the values, the norms. Now, of course, we may have some things in our families that are norms for us that are inhumane norms. Families have those biases, prejudices, other things, isms, and phobias that when we grow older, we have to determine I'm no longer a part of that norm. And maybe I start to question, do I fit into this culture? That happens. That's regular. That's regular for us to grow up and say some things that happen in my family I don't agree with anymore. What is it that I still can hold on to, and what am I shifting? Katrina says everything from beliefs to food to clothes to language to ancestral knowledge. Exactly. So if we have that in families, then we have that in schools, and we have that in workplaces, and we have that in our faith groups. We have culture. We have culture. And is it honorable or is it dishonorable? This is culture. We've said all this. The customs, including language, relationships, and guiding principles of an individual or group. The customs, including the language, relationships, and guiding principles of an individual or group. Then when we say we want a culture of honor, we're saying we want customs that reflect honor. We want language that reflects honor. That's a key place where it needs to show up. Think about your spaces that you're a part of every day. Do you have a culture that reflects care, that reflects respect, that reflects welcome and belonging? Do you have customs, language, relationships, and guiding principles that reflect care, that reflect respect, that reflect being welcomed, and that reflect belonging? Think about it for a moment. Think about it for a moment. Do we have that? If I have to do an assessment, then I can honestly say those are things that now in life I'm only really starting to see and develop. Because before it was about creating leadership culture, right? Anybody come through a time period where we wanted to have a space where everybody felt like they were developing as a leader? But sometimes we leave off things that were really critical, or we go over them real quickly. We talk about time management and we talk about being able to influence people, but we go through integrity for 3 minutes. And I don't ever remember mention of honor. And I used to be a leadership development assistant director for a very well-known nonprofit here in Metro Atlanta. And we would never go to honor. It was always those things where we felt they were connected to production. But honor is connected to production. So here are some aspects of honor. I want you to consider, how do these aspects show up in culture? Wisdom, words, witnessing, work. Wisdom, words, witnessing, work. We're going to go through each one. take a look at them. If you have any comments that you want to share just as we're going through, it doesn't disturb me at all. So please feel free to share in the chat room. If something pops up for you and you say, I have to get that thought out, I think I'll lose it. This is wisdom, applying skills and knowledge as needed for creating cultures of honor. There has to be some applied knowledge. And we can ask for wisdom. We can ask for wisdom. In my faith background, you'd ask the divine for wisdom. And in other spaces, I know that I can ask people for wisdom too. Give me some insight on that. My parents are a source of wisdom. Experience sometimes is a source of wisdom. Then there are people around us relationally that may be able to provide wisdom on how we can create these communities and these cultures with respect, welcome. This is posture too. Posture determines my actions. So if people ask me, why do I study and why am I the senior instructor for nonviolence at the King Center? It's because I found for myself, and I don't train other people on nonviolence from a place of hypocrisy. I found for myself that it helps me to apply skills and knowledge for creating cultures of honor. It teaches me how to have a posture that engages people with dignity, even if I believe they're in error with their behavior or their language. It ensures that I don't try to fight hate with hate. This is another quote from Dr. King. Nothing could be more tragic than for men and women and people, non-binary people, people who use pronouns that reflect that they are they or them, and all of the people of the world. Dr. King was using the language of his time. Nothing can be more tragic than for people, to live in these revolutionary times and fail to achieve the new attitudes and the new mental outlooks that the new situation demands. Nothing could be more tragic than to have these moments where we could develop culture. That's where I believe we are as human beings. Sometimes we may want to look at it and we just see the challenges or the obstacles. I think we are in a moment as humanity across the globe where we have a profound opportunity to determine who we want to be moving forward as educators, as leaders, as parents, as family members, as everything, every area of our lives. There's so many things popping up that remind us we better decide who we want to be. And we want to have wisdom to know how to move into that. There's words. Language is important. We want to cultivate and use language that perpetuates honor. If you've been in a space where the language encourages dishonor. Anybody want to give examples of language that you've heard in spaces you may have used that cultivates honor or dishonor? What are some words that come to mind? What are some phrases that cultivate honor or dishonor? Those kids, yes, they. And when I hear people say those, I'm like, uh-oh. There's a clear distinction here. Not our children, those kids. About some of our other phrases. Vulnerable kids, at-risk kids. I'm telling you, Katrina, now I'm looking at the news and I want to tell people anytime I see that phrase, at risk, I want to say, hell, we all at risk. We'll stay inside. We're living to project that label onto children. That's really an inhumane thing to do. But if you've done it before, I get it, because it was the language used to get grant money and to say we need help in these communities. I talked about that in the earlier session I did, salvation versus community. That language makes people think they need to go in and save the poor, helpless little at-risk children. What other language? Lazy. Sometimes it's the inflection of people use to convey dishonor. True, the tone, the tenor. That's why it's important to be able to identify the real meaning behind the words. Very important. So we have to start having longer conversations, Archie, because sometimes people say certain things. I recorded a podcast the other day with someone who had invited me on, and at the end she started to say I was so eloquent. Now I know her, so I didn't see it as that typical, oh, she's saying black women aren't normally eloquent type thing. I just didn't get that sense. Now I sent it to friends, and they said, "Did she just call you eloquent?" Did she? I said, yeah, but I don't think she meant it that way. And they said, how could you believe that? I said, I just don't. I mean, even if she did, then I'll have to go back and tell her that that's not something you normally do, or that's seen in a good light. When you do that with black people, it's as though you're saying, all right, articulate, as though you're surprised, right? So, but I try to look at how I know that person and what I know about them to determine what type of conversation I need to have about the real meaning behind the words. Was that dishonor, or was that just a true case of ignorance? And if it's ignorance, then how do I educate and how do I share so that that person doesn't do that again? Because they may run into somebody that's not Vonnetta West, and that podcast would stop in the middle and be over, because that person could become so upset by that they don't continue. So we're learning each other. See that exchange we just had? That's an example of things we have to do. We really, particularly when we talk about ways that biases and divisions have been intentionally cultivated by certain constructs in society, we really have not been in a position often to know each other, to learn each other, to understand each other. And it is important in our language that we have a culture of honor, inclusion, integrity, intentionality. That's the language. Inclusion, integrity, intentionality. Archie says, I had that conversation last week. I totally understand where you're coming from. Yeah, it's something for me. And it's enough for me when I hear people say I'm articulate or eloquent, that I do pause, because I think I don't hear them say that to white people. But I also know in community, if you know people come from places where they might not have been taught, don't say that, then I just often choose not to take offense. If I chose to take offense, I'd be offended all day. And I don't want to live there, right? We don't want to be offended all day. I don't. Offense, that place of being offended. I'm not talking about discrimination. I mean, when I look at certain things happening that are dishonorable, I look at ways to address it. But I'm not just going to sit in perpetual offense when people I know often haven't been taught what honor looks like. And they may think some of these comments are honorable. So we have words, wisdom, that's witnessing, confession about, an agreement regarding the damage of dishonor, and the urgent need to reimagine, change, and dismantle for the good of dishonored groups and for humanity. For the good of dishonored groups and for humanity. I want to get the last part of this quote, because I'm always looking at it and thinking about learning to live together. Together, we must learn to live as brothers, as a human family, or together we will be forced to perish as fools. Together we must learn to live as a human family. It's my paraphrasing there. Or together we will be forced to perish as fools. So somehow we have to agree that this is how we need to honor each other moving forward. I started these basics. See, sometimes we start at these large looming topics instead of saying, are we treating people as less than? Are we dishonoring each other in schools and in classrooms? And are we dishonoring children? Are we dishonoring parents? Are we dishonoring teachers? I hear people talk often and they're dishonoring teachers. I'm like, now wait now. If I hear people say teachers aren't doing certain things, I said, you don't know all teachers. That should be our simple response to a lot of comments. Question, do you know all teachers? I know great teachers. I know teachers who, growing up for me, changed the trajectory of my life just by saying there's greatness in you, who centered me in my life story and not themselves, and who taught me how to learn. That's important. And so now I can think for myself and I have critical thinking skills. Teachers opened that door for me, gave me the ability to examine issues and find out truths for myself. That's the greatness of educators. They pull out greatness that's already in us. You have to honor people to do that. Can't dishonor people and pull greatness out of them or help them to see the greatness that's in them. So we have to confess and agree. We're not who we should be. And this dishonor is damaging. How do we get to another space? If you're seeing dishonor, a lack of care, respect, compassion, belonging, and welcoming in your spaces as educators, start to examine that and ask some questions. Then there's work. There's strategy. I would encourage you to, based on this discussion today, if you're in this convening with people who are part of the groups that you're in every day, if you came with coworkers or no matter what, if you take some ideas back and you start to say, look, we need a strategy. We need some energy around this. I believe this is one of the solutions to how to create the communities that we need as human beings to help move us forward. These are simple questions. Who do we want to be to each other? I think we need to ask children, who do we want to be to each other? What type of culture do we want? That will help with goals for learning. If we say we want a culture where we pay attention to each other, we want a culture where we treat each other with respect, we want a kind culture. We call those expectations. I think we need to shift it to say this is the culture we want, because culture I'll carry with me everywhere. I have an individual culture. Each one of us has that. This thing about me, that's who I am, where people can say, those aren't Vonnetta's values. And I hope the older I get, if somebody hears something, somebody says Vonnetta said that, people would know whether I said it or not, just based on what they know of my culture and who I am. So we can participate in the strategy, the edification, the energy required to create cultures of honor. Strategy. Edification, what does that mean? What does that mean? The building people up toward honor. If you're in a space, an atmosphere, a workplace, a job, a position where there's perpetual dishonor, we know what that is. I'm not even talking about per se biases, prejudices, isms, phobias. I'm talking about, for whatever reason, people aren't treated with respect and dignity. You might not even know the root reason, but we can see it, and people who are on the receiving end of it can feel it. And I can feel it when it's happening to other people. I can feel it. It's a feeling of your stomach dropping, because people should be treated a certain way, and it's not happening. So this is one of those moments where we want to ask, is honor, what we perceive as honor in our spaces, only hierarchical? Are you in a space, I want you to think about that, where the only people that people try to honor, they think is honor, are people who are in certain positions? Are you in a place where the only people that are honored are people who are in certain positions? Think about that for a moment. You can share in the chat room or not. I just want us to consider it. I come from spaces, various groups, cultures, church, nonprofit, different places where honor is dependent on position. And if that's what we're teaching our children, what are we teaching them about respect, compassion, belonging, and feeling welcome? What are we doing? And if we only honor parents who do everything that we feel they should do, who come to all the meetings, who we believe fit into whatever standards we may have for parenting, then what are we saying about honor? Is it okay to dishonor people then because they don't meet our expectations? Often unreasonable expectations because we don't know all about what's happening with people. How does this translate into the way we engage as educators? This is like the self-check. Am I saying I need to be more honorable? I need to honor people. Not more honorable. That means I'm more deserving of honor. Do I need to be more honoring in my actions? My last district was definitely honor based on position. Most reminded us their title in discussions that were going south. Yes. When we don't honor all, we build barriers for the educating of our children. We do. I mean, if you think about it, even if you're in this session and you're saying, I might not see any of this, when you later are thinking about it, think about the part that honor and dishonor play in the cultures that you're a part of, in the communities that you're a part of, what it feels like energy-wise when people are honored, no matter what, right? If they don't have a high title, they're honored. No matter what they have on, they're honored. I just shun anything that teaches us to dishonor people. I really do. We have to honor we have to model what honor is. We do. For my nieces, I have children, but not any that I gave birth to or adopted that I say I'm their mother. I have children in my family, and I have children in different communities. I have some children in Liberia. There's some children in Ghana. And one of the things I try to honor for them, that I try to model for them, that I'm committed to doing is honor. That I don't want them to look at me and say, oh, she treats this person differently than she treats this person. Now, I'm not talking about not understanding relationships. Of course, I treat my grandmother different in terms of conversation and yielding to her instructions than I do a niece or a nephew, just because she has the experience and the knowledge to impart certain things. And there are things culturally in families where elders have a distinct place of honor. That doesn't mean you dishonor other people. That's just recognition of their position and of the things that they taught you and that you learned. Certainly in my family, you didn't dishonor people in my grandmother's presence, period. So we have to start to look at what is our modeling. Are we showing our children that no, when you walk down the street, if you encounter a person who doesn't have an address, you don't dishonor them by not making eye contact. You don't dishonor them by not answering when they talk to you. Even if you just have to say, I don't have it to give, or I don't feel comfortable doing that. You don't keep walking when people are speaking to you. You know what that shows our children? Dishonor. And that it's okay to dishonor. Dishonor is a demonstration of diminishing or diminished respect and regard for someone's well-being. Diminishing or diminished respect and regard for someone's well-being, or just for their personhood, for that matter. It should start at the top. Should honor people. That's a challenge for us as people, because a lot of what we're taught, it is based on there are people deserving of honor and people who are not. And there are biases and other things that play into that. There are people who think folks who do corrupt things are deserving of honor as long as they make money and they bring industry in. So then honor for some people is based on wealth and income, not on integrity, not on how people care for other people, but are you bringing in business? Are you making money? What's your family name? There's an honor that's higher than that. That's just about, I want to engage each person I encounter as though in them there's a spark of divinity, or there's just something innate in them that we should say, hey, let me treat them with dignity and respect. And if we don't have that, what do our cultures look like in our schools, in our families? Some of you may have families where there are certain people who are dishonored for various reasons. I've been to family gatherings and talked to friends who talked about their families and how they treat young ladies who have had babies who haven't been married. There are biases. There are phrases we use that are about dishonor. Phrases like illegitimate children. I don't know who came up with these things to call babies illegitimate. I don't know. But I know that's a phrase that's dishonoring. It's dishonoring. It's disrespectful. It's a label that stays with a human being. But we have these phrases that we have to start to work through and to work on. As we close out our session today, they go by fast, but it's great. Here's something we can do. We can study. I want to encourage you today to commit to studying more about honor and dishonor, and committing to studying your culture, all of your cultures that you're a part of, and developing, if you haven't already, what you want to be your culture as an individual. You want to be honesty, integrity, whatever it is, whatever characteristics, we need to be attentive to that. When people leave my presence, this is what I want them to have experienced. That's my culture. Take issue. Be concerned about it. Think about in your school system, if you're in a department, if you're a part of a team, take this up as something that you want to be attentive to. And then educate other people. Whatever you found in this session that was helpful, please share it. Please, too, practice. We've talked about some phrases today. Remember those phrases and think about some other phrases and begin to practice. See if there are thoughts that you have that contribute to dishonor. And don't be so hard on yourself. Think about things that you already do that help you to practice honor. And then practice and do those more. Then let's stay connected. I encourage you to, in all the places where I am, this is like something I talk about often, at Vonnetta L. West on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And my website is VonnettaLWest.com. VONNETTA LWest.com. So we can stay connected, keep having these conversations and being attentive to this. This is a comment by Katrina. Parents and children know when they and their loved ones are dishonored. They do. We may think they don't, but if you see an attitude from a parent, often it's because parents feel dishonored. Dishonored in a decision, dishonored in engagement. And we're so quick to say that's not true. I respect all parents, all children. And we have to ask, is there a way that I'm dishonoring? We can't act surprised when engagement efforts don't work, when we have been operating for so long from a system of we know better. We know better about people's children and about their communities. That's that piece we have to check. Thank you for that, Katrina. Thank you for bringing some practices we do as people to light. We must change how we treat others and be intentional about it. Yes, we have strategic planning about so many other things. Seldom do we have strategic planning around creating culture and honoring people, loving people, creating compassionate spaces. And we have to do that. It is essential, and this is a moment where I believe we're learning as humanity is more important and more critical than ever. Listen, our time is up. It's going by quickly. Please engage on social media. Uh, find ways that we can stay connected. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for your engagement in the chat room. Thank you for being a part of this convening. I want to thank Dr. Johnson and the IDRA team again, which makes me think about Idris Elba. I want to thank you again for inviting me, for allowing me to be a part of this gathering. It's been a great day for me. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.